Holy City Center Radio, this is episode 406, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, September 5th, 2025. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It is Friday. I hope you have an amazing weekend ahead. You know what to do. If you need plans, holycitycenter.com/calendar is where you need to go. Find out what is going on around town, not just this weekend, but beyond, especially for those of you who got to work the weekend. And I know there's lots of you out there, so you can always use that calendar to see what's going on all throughout the week. I also hope this past week has been good for everybody. This first week of September, yes, we are just a few months away from number one. Holiday season is just a month away, starting with Halloween, and then it really gears up, as you all know. And then, damn, we're almost at the end of 2025 already. That's shocking to me. 2020 still feels like it was like 3 months ago in some respects. But in any event, before we get into the latest news, as I mentioned in the last podcast, I had plans. That's supposed to be my trumpet fanfare there. Didn't have time to try to find an actual soundbite for it, so you get my amazing talent instead. But yes, I went out and did something. At least, don't get me wrong, I run errands and stuff, but nothing you guys want to hear about. But I did go to Credit One Stadium on Monday for Blink-182 and Alkaline Trio. It was a lot of fun. Crowd was great. I've seen both of these bands in the past, Blink several times, including I think 2 years ago now in Charlotte, and an Alkaline Trio, I believe, was earlier this year at the Music Hall. Both bands I've been listening to for many years, and it was just a lot of fun. I had pit tickets, which was great, so I got to be really close, got to take some good videos and pictures at times, and especially during Blink because they had some fun stage stuff going on. And yeah, the crowd was great. Everyone was into it. Everyone seemed to be having a really good time, just good vibes and atmosphere, throughout the entire evening. A nice mix of older songs as well as some of the newer ones. So if you were someone who kind of listened to Blink, like maybe when you were in high school or college or whatever, they played some of those biggest hits that you're probably familiar with. And then if you've been following them since then, they sprinkled in, a bunch of songs, from way back before they really got popular, but also, for their most recent album that just came out a couple years ago. So a lot of fun, enjoyed it. Hopefully got some more things on the horizon to talk about as far as events and fun things that I'm doing. So it's always nice for me. I feel like, I did something. It's nice to come onto the mic instead of being like, I don't know, nothing. I did work and, played video games or watch movies, just boring stuff. It's nice to finally be like, yeah, I did something, and it was good. And I was able to see a few people I knew while I was there, which was a lot of fun. And then seeing all the videos and pictures on social media the next day, I was shocked how many people I followed were at the show, obviously, some of those are people I just follow but have never met. With the Holy City Center account, there's plenty of people I just don't actually know. So it was fun to see everyone who was there. All right, but enough of that about that. Let's get into the news. All right, we have an update on that whole, the Department of Justice trying to get the voter rolls from South Carolina. I mentioned that there was a deadline that the government had imposed on the state, but it was unclear what, if anything, they could really do if the state didn't turn over the voter rolls. Well, we're kind of in a pause area right now, and that's certainly better than the state, capitulating and turning over our private data. So specifically, the South Carolina Election Commission was served a lawsuit and received a restraining order on Tuesday night of this week that ends up temporarily preventing it from sharing voter information with the federal government. So as I mentioned last month, the United States Department of Justice, DOJ, requested full voter information, including all of the approximately 3.4 million South Carolina voters' driver's license numbers and the last four digits of their social security numbers. So this raised concerns about privacy, and that's exactly what the plaintiff, whose name is Dr. Ann Cook, mentioned when she filed an initial complaint on August 28th. Cook is represented by State Minority Leader Senator Brad Hutto, who's a Democrat from Orangeburg. She is represented by his law firm. So in the complaint, as I said, Cook mentioned that, hey, the worry here is privacy. She claims that if the South Carolina Election Commission releases the data the DOJ wants, it would violate privacy rights, not just under state law, but also the South Carolina and U.S. Constitution. So, yeah, kind of a big deal if that is indeed what the court decides. Like, yeah, you can't really go against those. Try as you might. So the court granted a temporary restraining order and a motion for a preliminary injunction. The court said there is a likelihood of immediate and irreparable damage if the data were released. The judge cited privacy protections in state and federal law as the basis for the ruling, and the release of the voter data is now blocked until a hearing that's scheduled for next Wednesday. So coming up this week, the week ahead on Wednesday, there'll be a hearing, so we might have some more news, about a week from today when I record the Friday podcast. I will certainly keep you up to date. But for now, our data has not been turned over, and we'll see what the courts ultimately decide. Also, this week, we got some information about South Carolina students. They have, standardized testing. Whether you are from South Carolina or other states, you're probably familiar with it. It's run differently in different places. South Carolina is called SC Ready, and it's gone through different names over the years, but basically just seeing, hey, where are the students in the state at? Are they in particular subjects? It's usually reading and math are the big ones. And this is kind of a good news, bad news thing. So we'll go to the bad news first. More than half of South Carolina's 3rd through 8th grade students still can't do math on their grade level. So that's the bad news. Over 50% of 3rd through 8th grade students are not doing math at their appropriate level. Good news, reading scores actually reached all-time highs. And again, this is according to the state releasing the standardized testing data, which came out on Tuesday. State Superintendent Ellen Weaver and teachers advocates have said that much of the improvement in reading scores is due to a shift in how students learn to read. And state officials are hoping for similar results in math after launching a training program on this subject this past spring. So I'll talk a little bit more about it, but they believe that this new they basically just changed the fundamentals of how they taught kids how to read. And they're hoping a similar program for math, although it was short on details, so I'm not exactly sure how they're going to implement a similar program since they are very different subjects. But they're hoping that will also will have the same results in the future. So let's get into some specifics. So those results of the SC Ready end-of-year test were taken last spring, first of all, and they show that overall 44% of 3rd through 8th grade students statewide could do math as experience for their age. Obviously, that means, as I said at the top, over 50% cannot. Meanwhile, 60% could read on grade level. Now, they're saying all-time highs in some places, and that number is good. But I mean, is it? That's 40% of kids not being able to read on their grade level seems like a lot. That's still a pretty big percentage. Admittedly, I didn't do a deep dive into how this compares to other states and year over year and yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, much better than math, of course, but still seems like there's some room for improvement there, and I'm sure they would agree. So what is this reading program? So 3 years ago, the state began using what is called the LETRS program. I'm assuming it's pronounced letters, and that acronym stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. This program was used to train teachers in phonics, which is the strategy of sounding out letters and rhyming sounds to teach children how to read. Previously, they used something called 3Qing, which teaches children to use context surrounding the word to figure out its meaning. So again, it's hard to really know. I'm not a product of South Carolina schools. I don't have any kids in the schools, so I can't really speak in detail about these things. But it certainly seems like a much better strategy if you want kids to learn how to read, not just understanding the words, but also knowing how they're pronounced. That 3Qing thing where they use context surrounding the words seems like, yeah, they might be able to figure out what the word means, but would have no idea how to pronounce it. And pronunciation, can help you when you start learning more words. and you can use what you know about words that you've used previously. And I feel like that's how I was always taught how to read growing up in Connecticut, was that first, or I'm sorry, the first one I mentioned, which is the newer program here, which is the phonics version, where you try to sound out letters and sound out words if you're unfamiliar, and things like that. So in any event, glad that they switched to that program. And certainly, just on the surface of what I just read, seems like a much better program. And also, it appears just via the data that it was. So what are they going to do for math? Well, again, there wasn't a ton of specifics that have been released, but beginning in January of this year, teachers in 10 of the lowest performing schools in math started receiving training and best practices. The state also sent math coaches to help students in updated instructional materials. Excuse me. So they're already implementing some things to help out, and it's just in those 10 lowest performing schools. But the hope is, that during the fall semester that they will expand to 140 schools, and that is their plan right now. Similar to the reading program, which started as a pilot as well back in 2022, the Department of Education will evaluate what works and what doesn't work in these, those original districts, those original 10 that I mentioned, before they expanded out to the other schools. So they're going to see what actually helps the lowest performing schools. What are the kids responding to? What's helping? They're going to try a few different methods, and whatever works, they're going to roll out on a wider scale. So, hey, hopefully they get it figured out. Again, it seems like with reading, at least they, have changed to a better program, and I'm certain that they're still going to fine tune and figure out what continues to work long term. But so it sounds like it is not. It wasn't very good news to read that about the math scores, but at least they appear to have a plan that's already in place before these scores even came out. So it seems they knew there were some issues already. So that's, again, credit where credit's due. They probably knew this was coming. They started new programs and new ways of doing things, and they saw results with reading, and hopefully we'll see the same with math. All right, quick update. If you didn't see, South Carolina's new hands-free law took effect this past Monday. It makes it illegal for drivers to hold a phone or any mobile electronic device while driving. So be careful if you're out there, because some things that you might not have thought were a problem. A lot of people, I think, were like, oh, I can't hold my phone up to my ear and be having a phone conversation. Correct. You can't do that. But it's expanded. It's pretty much anything on the phone, which makes sense, of course, because phones can do so much more than, just have you talk on them. So here are some of the details. Drivers cannot use devices to read or send texts or emails. They can't browse websites. They can't post on social media, watch videos or movies, or take video calls. So like I said, some of you might have, I know people who sometimes will listen, quote unquote, to podcasts on YouTube, which is a video platform, but they're not actually watching the video. They're just listening to the podcast. And they would do that, at home, of course, but also while driving. I know people who will do that. They're not watching the video. They're just listening. But under this new law, you could get in trouble, because technically your phone is showing a video whether you're looking at it or not. So again, just something to keep in mind. And I think some people probably believe, there's maybe some workarounds here and things, but just be careful with any of that. Oddly, smartwatches and earpieces for voice communication are allowed. Now, I say oddly, not for the earpieces. I get that. If you're using a Bluetooth headset or whatever to make a call, makes sense. Smartwatches, I don't totally get, because unlike, say, an earpiece, where most of them you just kind of lift your hand up to your ear and you press a button or whatever. With smartwatches, I feel like people are still gonna be looking at their watch, even if they're pressing a button to do voice to text, or if they're getting a phone call, they still have to press something to answer it. So I just feel like that, in the spirit of the law they just passed, that makes no sense, because the whole thing is they're trying to get you to not hold your device and be looking at that device. But why can you, look at your smartwatch and press something, but you can't do that with your regular phone if it's in a holster or something? It just seems kind of bizarre. So there's a 180-day warning period that began on September 1st, which was Monday, of course. After that, violations carry a $100 fine for a first offense. Subsequent offenses within 3 years of getting that first fine could carry a $200 fine and 2 points added to your driver's license. Now, there are some exceptions. And again, I just feel like there's gonna be, just the way technology is and things. I think there's gonna be a way around some of these that people are gonna try. But so exceptions besides what I had mentioned before include using a device while legally parked. So obviously, it's okay to be in your car and on your phone as long as you're not driving. You have to be legally parked or stopped. So that means, like at a red light, it sounds like you'll be okay to do stuff as long as you're stopped. You can also operate your device in hands-free mode, and you're allowed to listen to navigation, music, or podcasts. So again, okay, hands-free mode, great. You can just speak and talk. That makes sense. But why, if you have your device, like in, how some people still have the device, a lot of people probably, where they, whether it's one of those vent clip ones or whatever, where they, put their phone in some sort of holster. And if the phone's ringing and you can just like press a button, how is that different than looking at your watch? Which chances are, when people have like phones on those holsters, they're usually like up closer to like the windshield. So for me, I feel like you're more likely to get in an accident if you're like turning to look down at your wrist than you would be to turn and look just slightly down from the windshield to like a phone. You can still see in your peripheral. You know what I mean? So I just feel like there's going to be, just like any new law, of course, there's going to be some hiccups. There's going to be some incidents that we hear about where someone got a ticket and then it's dropped because of whatever reason. So I just think there's a lot of gray area when it comes to this whole hands-free mode part of it. And again, what's the difference if someone's listening to a YouTube video versus navigation, music, or podcast? Not much. I totally get and understand if someone's propped their phone up and there's like a movie and they're just watching it as they drive. Totally get that. So I guess if you're one of those people who listens to video and in whatever way, I would just make sure your phone screen itself is, dark. So that way it's just like any other thing, with, you can be like, hey, look, my screen's not on. So yes, I am listening to a TV show, but I'm not watching it. Believe it or not, people do that too when they're driving. But anyway, so that's what the law is. Those are the details. Again, I think there's going to be some things that need to be worked out with this. And also there's always going to be technology and advances and changes. But the important thing here, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to tell you to get around any of these things. It's very dangerous to be operating your phone while driving, particularly if you're doing something like texting. So, you should be careful anyway, but some of these things that might not seem like a big deal when you're driving now are considered something you shouldn't be doing. So just keep all that in mind. And lastly, I want to send you into the weekend with a little fun. No, I mean, we shouldn't be bullying and roasting people, but sometimes when it comes to like politicians and stuff, they kind of deserve it. So, hey, I'm not saying being mean is great, but there's a link in the show notes to a YouTube video, which I was just talking about, but it's also a podcast. So Crooked Media is a company that was founded after Obama left office. It was created by some former speechwriters of his and some other guys that had various jobs within his administration. It has become this bigger podcast network. They host podcasts like Pod Save America, Love It or Leave It. And they've gone on to have more like cultural focused podcasts. And one of the other shows under their umbrella is called Hysteria. And it's it seems silly to say, but it's like a more women's focused podcast. I mean, it is. It's hosted by women. Most of their guests are women. And they're talking about some of the day's biggest issues, as well as some like pop culture stuff, but mostly political, whatever the biggest political story is. And they just, they're giving you a different perspective than you usually hear, because even on cable news and things, and admittedly, the, Crooked Media's other podcasts, they're very male dominated, number one, and white male dominated. So this was just a show where you're getting the same, because it's obviously all these podcasts are left leaning, liberal, whatever you want to call it. So you're getting the same, they're mad about the same things or pushing for changes, but they sometimes just give an extra perspective that a band might not have had or might not have thought thought of, excuse me. And I just think it's a pretty good podcast, regardless of, if you're a guy looking for, all right, is there another perspective to this that I don't see or understand? But if you're a woman, of course, too, because you finally are hearing people that, you're hearing women like yourself talking about the issues you're talking about instead of the millions of podcasts out there that are dominated by men. So in any event, that podcast has like a segment called, and if there's kids in the room, I'm going to swear here, but they have a segment called This Fucking Guy, which is basically when, just like you would think if you're out and some guy is just being a jerk and you're just like with your friends, you're like, this fucking guy. So that's kind of what the basis is. And usually it is a guy in its, it's politics or whatever. They're going into the background of someone, why they are terrible and should be voted out of office or whatever it may be. But they do talk about women in the segment sometimes. And our own Nancy Mace was the subject of this week's This Fucking Guy. You can go to the Hysteria podcast feed on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on if you want to hear it. Or you can go visit the link in the show notes, which is to YouTube, where you can watch as well as listen to them talk about Nancy Mace. And they do play clips including some from local news, and show like headlines from local papers. So it's kind of fun to watch the video because you can see, the stuff that we've all seen in the past living here. But it's interesting because this is a nationwide podcast. So more people, as if there wasn't, I'm sure plenty of people who are already aware of Nancy Mace because of her whole national Nancy push and her attempts to get on TV. I mean, she's up there with the MTGs and Lauren Boeberts of the world as far as people outside of their states knowing a lot about them and who they are. So it was just funny. It's a roast of her, basically, just brutal takedowns about some of the things she said and done. I was pretty impressed because a lot of times when the national, show, podcast, whatever, does a deep dive on, a South Carolina politician, they sometimes miss important points or stories or nuance. And I thought they did a really good job of researching a lot of the things she's been doing, not just recently, but prior to that turn she took, becoming National Nancy, becoming this Trump sycophant, becoming this just demon, attention demon, like constantly just needs to be on TV, needs to be the main character on Twitter. They talk about some of the stuff she did before then. And they even tackled the whole, she's not really the first female graduate from the Citadel. And they dive deep into that if you haven't heard that story. So if you're looking for a little chuckle, and yes, I know it's a little mean and catty, but I'm feeling a little mean and catty when it comes to certain politicians. And I'm no fan of Nancy Mace. And as each day goes by, and she says things like, stop transgender violence. No, she doesn't mean stop violence against transgender people. She means she believes the transgender community is inherently violent because at the most recent shooting, which is horrible, it happened in Minneapolis, the shooter was apparently trans. And so her and her ilk have jumped on this in their anti-trans crusade. So that's why I don't feel super bad about promoting something that is a little mean towards Nancy Mace. And I don't think you guys will mind too much either, so give it a listen. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you so much for listening. I don't know why people listen to me ramble, but I appreciate those who do. Even if you just listen for a little bit and you go, I can't do this whole episode. I appreciate it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. You can also like, rate, leave a review, all that good stuff. That's a big help for me as well. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. Have an amazing weekend. I'll be back with you next week. But until then, good night. Good luck.